Hello, people of Earth. Welcome to episode 1 of Oafcast. My name is Brennan, your humble host. My online handle is Oaftobar, hence the name Oafcast. And this is going to be a really fun time, guys. Episode 1 of a podcast I've been wanting to do for a long time. And just to give you guys a quick little introduction of who I am, in case you don't know, my name is Brennan, as I said before. I'm a philosophy major from Middle Tennessee State University, and along with enjoying philosophy and talking about all things of the world, I like film, I like music, and most recently, I am very obsessed with jiu-jitsu. But today we're only going to be focusing on that first part, and maybe a little bit of television as a subgenre of movies. Now, I know there's a lot of other podcasts out there that may talk about movies, may talk about philosophy. I promise you, this is going to be very, very different. Probably actually more of the same, but different in that it's my opinion. And hey, I care about what I'm going to tell you. I care about the movies I'm going to be picking out. My whole goal of stuff like this is to maybe find something that I didn't know about, maybe you didn't know about, convince you how good it is, and then you check it out and you love it yourself. So, let's get to it. Well, first we get a word from our sponsors. There are no sponsors. So now we can get to it. I want to talk to you guys about 2 really great pieces of content that have come across me in the last couple of weeks. We're going to start with a movie called Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Wow, guys, that sounds pretty risque. And the movie is very risque. So, just to give you guys some backstory, years ago, 8 or so years ago, back when Netflix had 4 times as much content as they do now, I went down a rabbit hole of finding artsy films, people's first films, Nolan's first film Following they had on there for a while, Pi, Darren Aronofsky's first film they had on there, and both of these are black and white, and they're artsy, and they were kind of film students who were very young and coming out, and I went down a rabbit hole of getting obsessed with that stuff, and getting obsessed with even more, and all David Lynch, and Jodorowsky, and Richard Stanley, and just tons of strange or weird movies that sort of came out a bit ago that I had just never heard of growing up. I feel like those aren't distributed in the same way that movies kind of are now. But, these things, they come and go into your life. And if you guys have ever heard of Criterion Collection, you've probably seen them at Barnes & Noble. They're a distributor that get, these nice old movies. They have a couple of Lynch movies, and they have all sorts of foreign movies, things that win Palme d'Ors, and things that are in the National Archives by the government, and, things that sort of transcend what it means to be film at times. They're a great little company, or I wouldn't say little, they've got tons and tons of films. And what they've kind of been doing is they take these old films and they restore them beautifully, and they sell them on Blu-ray, and they're kind of pricey, but they tend to be worth it because they also get some bonus content on there that's not just some silly director's commentary or deleted scenes. While they do have some of that, they have very thoughtful pieces done. They have things that may have not been offered before. So I think on my Mulholland Drive Blu-ray, which I don't have up here, but I would have to just to double check, but they have first off, if you're familiar with any David Lynch movies, there's no chapter selection, there's no commentary. If you buy a DVD from his website, you plug it in and it's like playing a VHS. It just starts and then it stops, and that's the end of it. There's no menu. But with this one, they have some commentary, and they have some stills and some sort of behind the scenes things. So it's like premium content for these sort of artsy movies that you may not hear about. And I love them. They pick out great movies. They have Fellini movies, and they have Tarkovsky movies, and growing up, it's not like I had people coming to me like, hey, do you know about Italian cinema? Hey, do you know about Russian cinema? It's all sort of The Dark Knight came out when I was in high school, and everybody was in a frenzy about that. It wasn't until later on when I was in college, and specifically when I started getting into philosophy. I was even in a philosophy of film class, and I was shown all of these Asian movies and these Italian movies I never even heard of, and they were absolutely mind-blowing. They're 40 years old and nobody talks about them because they didn't make $1 billion. And, you know, let's face it, everything's about making $1 billion these days. So I buy a couple of them every year. I subscribe to their newsletter, and a couple of weeks ago I got one of their newsletters, and they're like, hey, coming out in July, we're putting out Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And I read that and I was like, sounds like almost like a snuff film or some sort of artsy erotica film. And it kind of is the latter, but it's also kind of not. So I clicked on it and I checked it out, and it turned out it was Steven Soderbergh's first film. Now, if you guys know Steven Soderbergh, or if you don't, I'll familiarize you real quick. He did Aaron Brockovich, which I'm staring at my VHS copy right now. I actually really enjoyed that movie. But he's better known for doing the Oceans movies. Oceans 8, 9, 10, 11. I actually haven't seen any of them, and there's a new one coming out. I don't know. But he's done that whole series, and he's done a couple of other movies you can check out, but these are his most well-known movies. But this was his first movie. I was like, oh, that's really cool, because I know who he is, and I still think Aaron Brockovich is a really well-made movie. Even though it's like, I guess, sort of a strange movie, because it's Julia Roberts is like some like halfway slutty, almost lawyer. Still good shit. But it's his first movie, and he made it when he was 26. And I read that and I was like, shit, I'm 26. And, you know, I like movies and I want to make some movies, and I'm in the middle of writing screenplays, and it's like, oh man, what the hell am I doing? Like, this guy was 26 and he made this movie. And then just to sort of make things hurt even more, he apparently wrote it on a legal pad over the course of 8 days on a cross-country trip. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Because I've got like 4 screenplays I've been looking at for a year, and just slowly, piece by piece, moving at a tool pace. And I understand that if you can sort of zoom out, you know, eventually things get made when they need to be made, and there's patience and time, and everybody works on a different scale. But in that microsecond, you're just sort of like, oh, I'm just wasting so much fucking time. So I liked that. You know, you got me. Not to mention it has James Spader in it. You guys should know who James Spader is. He was Ultron, and he was Robert California in The Office, and he was on Seinfeld for a couple of episodes, and he did some other TV shows that I never really caught. I think he was on Boston Legal. He was the head guy on Boston Legal. Never watched it. Just know that. I don't know why. Probably because I used to watch Frasier, and there were commercials for Boston Legal. So I watched the trailer, which was just a clip, and it was really bizarre. It was like this house, and it felt hot outside, and James Spader is outside of the front door of the house, sort of curled up, and it looked like he had just been attacked. And Peter Gallagher, who plays a character named John Mulaney, is in there, and he plugs in this VHS, and he's watching this girl on a VHS talk about if she's ever had an orgasm. And I was just like, what the fuck is this movie? So I was kind of worried, because I felt like, oh, you know, you see something like that and it's like, okay, I got to know everything about it. And it's not coming out until July. So I can either buy it on iTunes or I can do this and that. And I was like, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait until July, not read about it on Wikipedia, not do any more research. I don't want to know anything about it. This is the weirdest thing I've seen in quite a while. So I was just like, I'm going to wait until July, and then I'm going to get it. And this is going to be great. Like 3 days later, I could not get this out of my head. And I ended up just like renting it, or I think I bought it. It may still be in my iTunes library. So I bought it. I watched it. It blew my fucking mind. It was like going back when I was first exposed to Following and Pi, and you sort of hear, you see The Dark Knight, or you see these Batman films, or Inception, and you're like, that's Nolan. But if you see Nolan's first film, it's a whole nother animal. It's a experimental. You know, if you think Memento's experimental, Following's experimental, I'll tell you what. Or Darren Aronofsky's Pi. I mean, Requiem for a Dream is very disturbing, but on some level, Pi is even weirder. There's a conspiracy element to Pi, and there's like numerology and religion and psychosis and drugs and paranoia, and like it brought me back to that, even though it doesn't really touch on any of those things. What's weird is it's such a human movie, and it's a very small scale. It takes place in Louisiana. There's James Spader, who plays Graham. There's Andy McDowell, plays Anne Bishop Mulaney. Peter Gallagher, who I mentioned before, plays John Mulaney, who's Anne Bishop's husband. And Laura San Giacomo, sorry if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, she plays Cynthia Bishop. So from now on, I'll refer to them by their character names, which is more important for what we're talking about. So Anne and Cynthia are sisters. Anne and John are husband and wife, and Graham is John's old college buddy. And just to keep this in mind, James Spader is Graham. He's our sort of main character. Now, sex, lies, and videotape sounds sort of weird and erotic, and I said before it was. And that's sort of what I was expecting, is like, well, this is going to be one of those, late 80s, early 90s movies where there was, I don't even know how to say it, but there's like a weird, like, sexualness or gratuitousness to some of these movies that came out, or even now, there sort of is, like Blue is the Warmest Color, or Nymphomaniac. You have these things that are like slightly gratuitous or slightly provoking, and that's what I was expecting. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't. It was nothing like that at all. There wasn't anything, I would say, sexy about it. And Alan Moore talks about this because he wrote these. If you know who Alan Moore is, he did The Watchmen and V for Vendetta. He's a comic book writer. We did one of my all-time favorite comics, The Saga of the Swamp Thing. And he's had a long history of writing comics. And he didn't just write superheroes, or weird people, like, V, or, he did some Superman stuff. But he wrote some weird erotica stuff. And I remember thinking about that, like, aren't you just making pornography? And I remember reading something where he said there's a borderline between trying to maturely talk about the subject and then trying to get somebody off. So there is a difference between, I think what you would kind of poorly label erotica, because maybe that sort of actually says, oh, that's like that section of the bookstore that you kind of don't want to go down. It's a very strange section of things, like lots of shirtless men with horses and shit like that. But it's sort of leaning on trying to maturely talk about things that you wouldn't normally do, and then you don't want to actually be turning anybody on. Now, I thought this movie would be attempting that, like attempting to turn you on, and it's not. Again, this is a very human movie. Each of our four characters represents a spectrum of what I can only ascribe as people's relation to sex, of this spectrum of sex and relationships. You have one person, Graham, who sort of has a fetish that is almost shied away from, but he's still very honest about, because he has some sort of moral code. But there's an extremity to it on some level. You have Anne, who is totally shy from it. She's not very experienced in it. She's not very interested in it. And, she sort of doesn't have a problem talking about it, but also she literally says in the beginning, there's a scene where she's talking to her psychiatrist, and she's just like, well, I just don't see the point in it. I don't see the point in masturbation, and I don't see the point in sex itself. Then you have her husband, John, he's crazy. He's having an affair with her sister. Like, this dude is like filled to the brim of, he's dropping out of his high-level lawyer job so that he can go get off. And then you have Cynthia, who's bordering on a couple of these. She also has a high sex drive. She's not ashamed of it, but she is ashamed of who she's picking as her partner on some level. But then it's also tied in of like, the wrongness of that is something that she enjoys, the badness of it, the taboo-ness of it. They both like. So there's this spectrum of how, perhaps, you can get a group of people together and you can find all of them. This person's highly interested in it. This person's not interested in it. This person's interested in very weird and specific things. And the director, Steven Soderbergh, even said, like, all four of these people, to him, feel like parts of his life where he was at when he was doing something that matched up with what Graham was doing, or John was doing, or Anne, or Cynthia. And it's really interesting in how all of these things played out, because it is about something that we would say is maybe taboo. We don't really want to talk about sex all that much. Maybe we do because we think it's cool. Maybe we don't because it makes us uncomfortable and nobody's ever talked to us about it before. But it's hard to have an honest conversation about these things. So I feel like this movie was an honest conversation about these things. So I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to spoiler alert anything, which in future things I may not be as wary of. But for this one, I would rather just try and pull you in, and maybe you'll go see it on your own, because it's very interesting. And it's not something that I would want to give away, because it's like I don't want to give away the ending to a good story or a good conversation if it's not totally integral to me reviewing it, because I'm not really trying to review it. I just want to expose you to something, and maybe if you do go out and check it out, you'll think about it in a broader way, which is where this bullshit philosophy degree comes into play. So Anne, not interested in sex. Her husband, John, very interested in having an affair with Anne's sister, Cynthia. And his friend is coming into town, Graham. He hasn't seen Graham since college. Now they're probably close to 10 years past college. John is a high lawyer, making tons of money. Anne's a stay-at-home lady, stay-at-home wife. So Graham comes into town, and he doesn't have a lot of belongings. But right off the bat, you can tell he's a very honest person. He has a very high sort of moral authority with himself. And John doesn't. He's pretty much the exact opposite of John. Graham doesn't have a lot of belongings, not really interested in it. He just has a few things that he cares about, which end up being his collection of videotapes, which we can get to. And John has a big house, and a nice car, and he's got a pretty wife, and he's got a good job, but he's also a piece of shit and a liar. There's even a scene where pretty early on in the first act, after Graham and Anne meet, he comes into town, he has dinner at John's place, and then him and Anne decide to go sort of get coffee the next day. And he's just talking about her husband right in front of her, like he's a liar. He's not a good person because he's a liar. And it's not that he knows anything of what John's doing behind the scenes. He just knows him for who he is. And he's the exact opposite. And then Anne's like, yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from. They sort of have this conversation, and Graham just sort of lets it be known, like, oh, I'm impotent. Yeah, I can't get an erection in front of people, in front of women, in front of anybody. It's weird. I didn't even know what to think. I was just like 15 or 20 minutes into this movie, and it's like, what the fuck is going on here? I don't get what any of this is. Like, and then you would think, like, I felt like if somebody told me that, I'd just be like, what the like, why the hell are you telling me this? What does it have to do with anything? And it does have to do with their conversation. They are talking about sort of things like that, and it's almost a mirror of a couple scenes earlier where she's talking to her psychiatrist, and she's just like, she's open to having the discussion about it, but she's also disinterested in doing the thing itself. So they're having this conversation about it, and she's letting it be known, like, she's not very interested in it, and he actually can't really engage in it. So things go on. The Cynthia and John continue their cheatingness, and it sort of starts getting to Cynthia. She's not enjoying it as much, and Anne ends up since Graham doesn't really have anything going for him, John and Anne decide, like, they help him find a house and help him get set up, and I think he gets a job in the town, and there's just this very bizarre scene. Again, I mean, the movie, all of it is these very bizarre setups, but they all have like a very good purpose, and nothing of it is trying to, it's not trying to make you uncomfortable. It's just trying to have a conversation with you that you probably wouldn't normally have. So there's this scene where James Spader, Graham, sitting in his living room, and there's like a shitty couch and a shitty chair, and there's just this desk with this box of tapes and this little TV, and he's sitting there draped in a bed sheet, and he's like almost sweating, and he's just watching, and there's just this girl talking about her sexual experiences on the TV, and Anna comes and knocks on the door, and he just sort of is like, doesn't say anything, and just gets up and casually turns it off, and it's just like, it's open, and walks around the corner and starts just casually getting dressed like he had just woken up, and she's doesn't think any differently of what's going on, and he's like, oh, can I make you some tea? And she's like, sure, okay. And, and she's like, what are all these tapes? And he's like, oh, there's a private matter. And she's like, what's on them? And he's like, he just flat out says, I tape women that I have, and I have conversations with them. I interview them. She's just like, what do you interview them about? And he's just like, their sexual experiences. And she's just like, that's really fucking weird, and bolts. And then that starts to create a rift between them. But it's like, this is an honest guy. This is sort of drilling in two things. One, he's a pretty strange dude. Two, he's a very honest dude. She goes back. She doesn't know what to say or anything like that. She's talking to her Cynthia. She doesn't want to tell her husband. So she tells Cynthia, her sister. Now, we know Cynthia is very sort of like, let's say, primal or really horny. It's pretty obvious, her character. And Anne tells Cynthia, what happened? She's like, well, did you watch any of the tapes? No, I didn't watch any of these things. Did you let him tape you? No, I didn't, didn't have this conversation with him about this. But it gets to Cynthia, and she starts thinking, man, what is this about? And she goes over to his place. And he just sort of he's, it's a weird thing. Every time somebody knocks on his door, he's just like, hey, it's open, come on in. And she comes in. It's just like, do I know you? Never met you before. Oh, I'm Anne's sister. They get to talking, and she's just like, she told me about the tapes. Do you want to interview me? And he's like, okay, why not? So then there's, this quote unquote interview, and they talk, and she gets like steamy, and she starts getting undressed, and then eventually there's it doesn't really show anything, nothing like there's nothing gratuitous that happens. Like, it's just sort of brushed over, like it's all implied, like they're having this conversation, and then she just like wants to get undressed, and like he can't do anything, and he's just sort of filming, and then it ends. And she's like all riled up, and she goes over and finds John, and they have like this there's this like crazy sort of like your 80s sex scene, like like what The Room was going for. It's like that, except it's well done, and it's not like weird or anything. It's just to show like, yeah, she was really worked up about all of this, and now she wants to let it off. So then they're in this post-coital thing, her and John, and she tells him about it. And if I'm not getting this mixed up, sorry. I'm sorry. I think I totally sorry. Whew, sorry for that pause. I should cut that out, but I'm not. All right. So I just have this page pulled up, and I just wanted to make sure that I was giving you some of these details in the correct order. So I think he's like weirded out by it, but he's more. But John is sort of pissed off that Cynthia went and did this, and then later on, it's known like Cynthia lets it be known to Anne that she went and did it, and then pieces start to sort of come together, and she sort of figures out that John and Cynthia are having a relationship, and she eventually goes to Graham and it's just like, I want to make a tape. I want you to tape me. I want you to talk about me. Now, I don't want to give any more of it away, because then you sort of get into the third act of things where everything comes to a head. The lying, the honesty, that does become a problem. All of the intertwining relationships of how everybody's interacting, these all culminate in a head in the third act in like just very interesting ways. And the thing that I kind of took away and thought about it was, and what is, the goal of, I believe, Soderbergh's film is, these things complicate our relationships so much, even though we don't even want to talk about them a lot of the time. You've got three people that don't want to have an honest conversation or particularly engage in an honest way. It's all extremely selfish. I mean, the only character who's totally honest, totally innocent, is Anne. I mean, but even she, has something that she needs to work out, because there has to be, and that's the thing that some of them come to realize in the end is like, okay, well, what I'm doing is actually selfish, and I will have to give something up. For some people, this works out well. For other people, it doesn't work out so well. But the whole goal of this, I feel, is just that relationships and sex create so much weird conflict that we're probably even unaware of. And I think this is just on a heightened level. Not everybody's in some very strange foursome with estranged people and sisters and brothers or anything like that. But even on a minimal scale, I think that is entirely applicable. I mean, Graham's, be it a strange dude, he's a very honest person, but even that honesty has some sort of self-centeredness in it. And John is, he's obviously just a piece of shit lawyer. Not all lawyers are pieces of shit, but he is a lawyer, he is a piece of shit, and he's a liar. Things may not work out so well for him, but you guys can watch the movie and figure that part out. Oh, thank you, water. So, man, it's a crazy film. I'm totally going to be buying it in July. It comes out in like a month. But it's man, it's so weird to even sort of think about, like, I'm still digesting this, 2 weeks later, and I plan on watching it again and trying to keep digesting it, because on a film level, on a screenplay level, on a character-driven level, if you take out the sort of moral thing, it's really well done. The character arcs are brilliant. The setting's brilliant. The cinematography, the filming, how everything is done. For somebody's first film at 26 years old, dude, there's no way. I do not think I could make a movie this good right now. Like, I mean, it's pretty unreal. Especially as far as premiere films go, filmmaking wise, it's a bit better. I mean, it's better than these Nolan films or these Aronofsky films. Not to hate on them, or not that they're shit or anything like that, but this thing feels more complete. It feels like a more complete and more of an idea that many people can relate to, despite it being so artsy and so sort of taboo. Well, I highly recommend it, you guys. I mean, he made this when he was 26. It cost him, what the fuck did it cost him to make? 1.2 million. Good on him for getting all that money. Outlaw Productions, distributed by Miramax. Came out in '89. Dude, it premiered at the '89 Cannes Film Festival, and it ended up winning. It didn't even mean to enter it. It was actually by accident. I believe the story was that one film dropped out, and the production company decided to throw his in so that they could fill it with something, and it ended up winning the Palme d'Or, which is like the highest achievement you can get there. It's crazy. And listen to this, guys. The Library of Congress's National Film Registry deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant in 2006, which means it's going to forever be preserved in probably some mountain hidden away with Area 51 artifacts. It's crazy good. I'm amazed. It took me 26 years to even find this movie. I've never heard of it before. I'm not the biggest Soderbergh fan. I've never seen these ocean films. I've never just browsed his Wikipedia page or anything, but look, guys, this is twofold. Criterion Films is just constantly killing it. And there's always something new around the corner. If you think you've explored so many things, maybe your tastes start to get dull or bored, or the fact that there's so many things out there. This just randomly came across my email. I wasn't looking for anything weird. I think even at the time I was just sort of burnt out on so many other things. I didn't even know what to watch. And it just came across, and 3 days later, after obsessing over this, I get it, I watch it, my mind is still blown. I can't recommend it enough. And James Spader's performance is unreal. Unreal, man. I love Robert California. He's a great guy. So, again, Sex, Lies, and Videotape comes out in July on Criterion. I think you can pick it up on digital stuff and download it however you guys want to do it. It's up to you. Highly recommend it. Let's move on, though. Let's move on to something that I heard about for a while. I was extremely skeptical of. How many more platform companies are going to come around, man? We've got Netflix. I'm not big on Hulu. I pay for Prime just for the shipping. I don't watch any of the videos. And then YouTube decides to come along with YouTube Red. And you know what? I have an ad blocker, so I don't care about your ads. I'm never playing anything mobile that I feel passionate enough that I need to pay $10 so that I can minimize it and do other things. And I'm not sure. I think they had a show. They canceled PewDiePie's show. I mean, I like Felix. I don't think he did anything wrong there to have anything canceled. I'm just skeptical of Google in the first place. And I think they had like a Jake Paul show or movie or something on there, or Logan Paul. One of those guys who's the weird vlogger character. I think that was canceled as well. Probably rightly so. But redoing the Karate Kid, I didn't understand it. I thought it was like short, or I thought it was like, what was it? College films or something like that. Those people who used to make those short movies in the like mid-2000s, College Humor. I thought it was like one of those, like a 5-minute thing. I never checked it out. I was like, whatever, dude. We're rebooting everything. You're going to do more Karate Kid shit, and now you're just going to slap on Cobra Kai. I didn't pay it any mind. And then I just kept hearing about it. Then I discovered it was actually a TV show that they were doing. I heard about it from some UFC fighters who were talking about it. I think some people mentioned it on Rogan's podcast. And finally, my buddy came in and was like, hey man, have you seen this yet? Actually, I had a bunch of people message me. If anybody out here is listening and you mentioned the show to me, first off, thank you. Second off, whoa, Cobra Kai is awesome. I never thought YouTube could make something that stellar. Let me pull this up, man. Cobra Kai is awesome. So, in case you guys haven't seen it, it's sort of like a reboot of the Karate Kid films, and Ralph Macchio reprises his role as Daniel. William Zabka reprises his role as Johnny Lawrence. And I remembered when I was watching the first episode that there was something I watched like 2 or 3 years ago. There's like a viral video where this guy talked about how Daniel was actually the bully. And before I even watched the video, I don't even remember the last time I watched Karate Kid, but I started having a flashback to some of those scenes where I was like, oh yeah, I think he does kind of like instigate some things, and it was kind of a jerk, but this will probably just be like a funny video. No, it was actually like a solid 5-minute video. And by the end of it, I was just like, the screenplay for this is a moron, because Daniel is actually a bully. I'll see if I can put a link in the bio, or I'm sure if you guys just Google Karate Kid was a bully or something like that on YouTube, you'll find it. But yeah, it's like this perspective of this new kid comes in town, and like there's the scenes on the beach where he sucker punches him, or he there's like in the movie there's like a couple months gap where Daniel and Johnny are not interacting at all, and then like at the school dance, Daniel just dumps a bunch of water on him, and then just he's like picking fights with them, and then they come into his dojo, and at the Cobra Kai dojo they're like, don't touch this guy until the karate tournament, and then until the karate tournament Daniel's harassing all the Cobra Kai people. It's like fucking, it's hysterical, this video that points it out. So this show, it seems like somebody at Google or wherever, somebody who's friends with somebody at Google, was just like, oh yeah, this is totally correct. Let's just make a show on this. Like, let's just do what everybody else is doing. Star Wars, this one takes place 30 years after this. Ghostbusters sort of takes place after this. We're just going to do this. This one, Karate Kid came out 34 years ago. Let's find out where everybody is now. And it's amazing. It's amazing. Johnny Lawrence is like this drunk, pathetic dropout dad who like is just a handyman, loses his job because he freaks out. He doesn't even freak out. He just calls somebody a bitch. And then he's like driving by, and of course the number one car salesman in the area is Daniel LaRusso, who's like kicking prices and slashing down your car payments and everything like that. It's the silliest thing, but it's like, of course, like this is actually how this would turn out to be. And I loved it. Man, I really I can't believe how well a lot of the character arcs are. This isn't like a flawless show, guys. There's some weird quirks which I may get to, but the Daniel arc, the Johnny arc, and then their like apprentice arcs are really great. Some of the secondary people I could have done without, or you could have rewritten them, or you could have consolidated a couple of people. But Daniel is he's the number one sort of guy in town. He's got all these connections, and he's at the country club, and he's got a hot wife, and he's got a good looking kid, and then he's got another kid who I could have done without, the chubby fat kid who is supposed to be like comic relief of some sort. That all felt very forced, and I don't even want to talk about it later. I want to talk about it right now. His son's character is worthless. He doesn't really add anything besides some commentary of like, there's a lot of commentary of young kids are just on their phone, and these are kids who are 10 years plus younger than I am, and I don't have as much of a problem with teenagers as apparently this 40-year-old screenwriter does. But yeah, the kid's lazy. He says a bunch of smart ass shit. Daniel takes his iPad away or something, or his PSP away, which I don't think kids are still playing PSP anymore. He should have had a Nintendo Wii U, Nintendo Switch, sorry. And Daniel takes it away, and he's just like, Alexa, order another one. It's like, what? That seems out of place compared to everything else that goes on. Like, that just seemed a little bit much. And that kid has no fucking arc. The kid literally does nothing. He's in the same place at the beginning of the show that he is at the end, Whereas you can't say that for pretty much anybody else. So I just want to get that out of the way, because that was one thing that really bugged me. But, Johnny's got a good looking kid, good looking daughter, big house, all this cool stuff. Everything has worked out really well for him. And there is parts where he has to sort of come to terms with maybe he was a bully. Not in a big way. I feel like maybe they're going to be saving that for the second season, which they've teased, and I don't know if that's confirmed. I'm sure that's confirmed. Everybody's telling me about this show, and it seems to have gone over really well. But they're sort of setting him up for that, of like, he's sort of revisiting his past in Miyagi. Throughout like the first 3/4 of the show, he has these flashbacks to where one part of his house he had turned into a dojo, and you come to find out that it's just been filled with all this crap that he's built up all the years. And then in one episode, he's just like, yeah, I'm going to clean all this out. And then he's in his gi and they're practicing moves and stuff. And he's like trying to get his daughter to come in, and his daughter, like when she was younger, practiced karate and stuff with him. And that's all really interesting as an arc of, here's this guy. They're both, Johnny and Daniel, they're both revisiting their past of martial arts in very different ways. And I liked how they did Daniel's. In the beginning of this, it's not even something he thinks about. It's actually something he sort of uses as exploitation for his car business and for his sort of character of who he is around town. And then by the end of it, it's something that he's really taken back to heart. He's emptied out this part of his house. He's brought in a young kid who sort of may need some direction in his life, who turns out to be Johnny's son, who was sort of trying to manipulate the situations and eventually doesn't want to. But he's coming back to what martial arts meant to him. And despite all of the bully stuff that's funny in the YouTube video and that is referenced in the show itself, by the end of it, his student loses where Daniel had won in the original one. But there's this like great scene at the end. Of course, they're going to have a second season, and spoiler alert, it's not that big a deal to spoiler this. You can see 90% of the outcomes coming. This isn't like a 10 out of 10 Westworld show where you're confused and you're like, what the hell's going to happen next? It's all pretty well laid out, but it's still very satisfying. So in the end, they go to Mr. Miyagi's place, which Daniel still owns, and now he's going to open up and have all these students. And in the second season, I'm sure they're going to erupt with, some massive karate tournament or something. So that's cool. Now we got Daniel out of the way, because the star of the show is William Zabka, reprising his role as Johnny Lawrence, who is, as I said, downtrodden, deadbeat dad. And he sticks with this rigidness of like, you're an asshole, I'm gonna let you know you're an asshole. And he's still got these instincts of karate. He beats some kids up who are picking on another kid, and it's like a commentary. I feel like some of it's commentary on PC culture. Of like safe spaces and whatnot. Even at the school, when they're in the school, there's this principal lady who comes out and she's just talking about safe spaces and wanting to protect these kids. And there's like jokes about gender neutrality and things like that, which are very subtle and surprising, coming from Google. Last year there was those Google Docs and all that nonsense that was going on. So that was sort of strange to think about how Google's associated with this show. And this is a guy hardened from the 80s who's like, it's about making out with hot babes, drinking beer, kicking ass, like not being a nerd, and all of this stuff. On some level, he's really offensive to all of these kids, but it hardens kids. In the beginning, of his arc, when he's trying to get his karate studio back and trying to make money and trying to get back into this, he gets all of these kids who were not what you would have gotten in the original Cobra Kai. You're not getting athletes or jocks or anything like that. He ends up getting all of these nerds and he sort of bullies them. And at first, these kids are sort of upset by it. And then most of them get sort of battle hardened and they're like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do something about this. But unfortunately, he doesn't even mean to do this, but these kids do become total jock assholes. I mean, by the very last episode, these kids suck. The main kid, sorry, Miguel. Main kid Miguel. In the beginning, you feel sorry for him, and he's just a kid getting bullied, and he's got braces, and he's got a crush on the hot girl or whoever at school who actually is Daniel's daughter. And you're like, yeah, this kid, he's gonna get tough, and then he starts kicking kids' asses at school, standing up to the bullies after they've been bullying him, and he sort of recruits his nerdy friends. They all come in, and then by the end of it, you're just like, whoa, this kid's a jerk. He gets drunk. He sort of hits the girl that he's supposed to be dating from a misunderstanding. He's a total asshole at the karate tournament. He seems to just be an asshole all around. All of them kind of do by the end of it. And it's like Johnny, he's unknowingly created a monster of these kids, which he didn't mean to. I mean, I don't even think his character was that aware of what he was doing. He's just trying to be himself and trying to get these kids to toughen up and trying to redeem himself. Because there is an episode, I think it's episode 8, where he lays out that YouTube video I referenced earlier. He sort of lays something out like that in a sort of quick monologue where he's like, this kid from Jersey comes into town, he provokes me on the beach, I try to let him know what's up, try to tell him this is done, we've squashed this, he sucker punches me, even tell him we're not going to mess with him, and he's shitting on us at school, and there's nothing I can do because my karate teacher doesn't want me to do anything. And you get more backstory because it turns out there's a switch, because when Daniel was young in the Karate Kid movie, he was the poor kid coming in, and Johnny was a rich kid living in Encino and had a nice big house. And it turns out his stepdad was an asshole to him his whole life, wasn't really there, wasn't supportive of anything like that. And then his sensei at the dojo, we all know he was a total jerk to him. So he's trying to not necessarily echo the violence and the negativity of his past. But he didn't really have a choice for a long time. And it's now coming back into martial arts, coming back and trying to help these kids while still being himself. He wants to be a dad again. He wants to redeem it and build champions and build Cobra Kai back and bring all of this back up and get to where he should have been when he was, 18 or whatever. Man, I love it. Man. After I finish Westworld, I may have to go back and rewatch this for sure. It's really good, you guys. If you're a fan of the original Karate Kid stuff, just the first one. I think the second one's pretty okay. I haven't seen it in a long time. I think the second one was where he actually went to Japan and had to battle some people who were contractors stealing people's land. And then wasn't the third one with what's her name? wait. I want to find out what the third one was there, because there was Karate Kid Part 3. I don't remember that one. 2 is okay. So there's the Karate Kid Part 2, and Part 3. I don't remember which one is Part 2 and which one's Part 3. So one of those I don't think I saw. The next Karate Kid in '94. Yeah. With Hilary Swank. Can you guys imagine? First off, in Cobra Kai, one of the executive producers is Will Smith. So I swear to God, if Jaden Smith is in the second season, I'm gonna lose my shit. And I'm only going to be happy about it if Hilary Swank reprises her role and comes back to do something. But man, it's great It's fun. It's hilarious. I think there's like good commentary on how older people view younger people and vice versa, and sort of what the culture coming up is of, you know, your phones and your technology and how interconnected everybody is and how things go viral. I mean, like, girls get bullied and they talk about how it's viral. And what I thought was really interesting was when one girl got bullied and her friend, Daniel's daughter, is trying to tell her, you know, these things get popular and people will forget about it in 2 days because something new will be viral. And what really hit me, I mean, I think this is actually the best line of the show now that I'm saying it out loud. This girl who got bullied says, for them, it lasts 2 days. For me, it's going to last my whole life. And I thought that was actually a very profound statement. And remember, this is all connected to Google. This is all connected to YouTube. The virality, if that's the right word, you know, how viral things get, the impact that can have on kids and people, you know, ranging from Star Wars kid to Humongous and the social justice warriors. And then you have your Jordan Petersons and, you know, how things get manipulated, how they get spread around, how there's misinformation and there's bullying attached to it. It's all really poignant in that one sentence that she says, man. I mean, for these kids, yeah, they'll forget it in 2 days. She's going to remember that her whole life. Like, that's going to stick with her. Fortunately, her character, you know, becomes a real karate star. And fortunately, she also does not become one of the asshole Cobra Kai kids. But she is in Cobra Kai. And look, I can't recommend the show enough, you guys. We're at 51 minutes. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Watch Cobra Kai, watch Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And one other thing I have here written down that I wanted to talk about is a YouTube channel and a website, a group of people called Red Letter Media. If you guys have not ever heard of Red Letter Media, I found out about them years ago when they first put up a Star Wars prequel review, which totally changed my life, changed my opinion on the Star Wars prequels. I don't want to get too much into it, but they're really great content creators. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I don't know them in any way. I wish I did, because I could learn. I feel like I can learn a lot. They make great reviews. They have different shows that they do. They have one called Half in the Bag, where they talk about new movies that are coming out. They have one called Review, where like once a month they pick an old movie that we may have forgotten about, or something that may be sort of off the wall that you've never heard of. Sort of like what I did with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And they talk about it. They break it down. And my favorite one is Best of the Worst, where they all sit down and they pick bad VHSs to watch. It's so hysterical. They do those pretty often. The newest one, if you've never heard of Red Letter Media and you go search Best of the Worst, find the newest one that they've uploaded. Today is Tuesday, June 5th. So find the closest one to that date. You know what? I'll even find the episode right now for you guys. I'll be that nice, because I bet it'll pull up. Man, it's so hilarious, and the content is so good. A lot of it goes up to like an hour long or so. I mean, there are days, there's been months where I don't watch anything on Netflix. I don't watch anything else. I will binge Best of the Worst and rewatch all of these things because they're so great. Best of the Worst, Kill Squad, Ryan's Babe, and Demon Warp. I mean, any of these, if you just go and you find a playlist for Red Letter Media, and like all of these are so gold. Their videos are great. Their reviews are great. I just really enjoy them, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. If you're a fan of movies, I definitely think that this is a channel that you should check out. Even if you're a casual fan, I think that Best of the Worst in and of itself is just hilarious for all sorts of reasons. And I mean, these go from 40 minutes to over an hour long, and I feel like this content is better than so much shit that's put out there these days, especially like some of this trash that I see on Prime or Netflix or Hulu. Not that it all is, but there's just some shit on there I've wasted my time even checking out when I could have been rewatching this, honestly. Even for the 5th time, these episodes can be so much funnier than some of the bizarre stuff I don't even want to really get into here. Wow. We're hitting past 54 minutes. Guys, I've been meaning to do this for a long time. I've actually been really self-conscious about doing this for a long time. I've attempted this multiple times. I have a dozen voice memos where I would sit in my car and while driving around for work, try and record something. I get 10, 15 minutes into these things and I turn it off just because I feel embarrassed or I feel frustrated or I feel like, why the fuck should anybody care what I have to say? And you really don't. If you listen to this and you like what I have to say, that's cool. I really just hope that you guys maybe check something out or maybe think about something in a different way than you have it before. That's all I really want to take away from this. And I actually had a really good time doing this. Not all of these in the future will be solely me. I just don't have any guests around me. I don't really live near too many people to talk to about some of these things. And we're not always going to be talking about movies. I haven't even looked at how I can upload this on iTunes, but I think the category will probably be something along philosophy, just because I think that can tie into everything. I think my approach to anything that I want to talk about will just naturally come from that sort of perspective. I tend to babble on about things. I tend to be a little bit too deep about things and overthink things and be very critical of things and pick them apart. I just like the puzzle in doing that. Excuse me. So we'll be talking about movies. We'll be talking about music. We'll be talking about books. Maybe one day we'll talk about jiu-jitsu if anybody's interested enough besides me, because I'm obsessed with it. I plan on having interviews with people, fun conversations. This to me is a mix of what Red Letter Media is, what I hear Kevin Smith do, what I hear Paul Scheer do with How Did This Get Made, and especially one of my two biggest influences are the Joe Rogan Experience and Tell 'Em Steve Dave. Anybody who knows me, I rave and rant about those shows all the time. This has been a long time coming for me personally, and I really hope somebody listens to this all the way. Wow, I can't believe we're actually closing in on an hour. I feel pretty weird about this. And then just one more thing. While we will be talking about a lot of the stuff I mentioned, I have been planning some big projects in the future. So specifically for movie stuff, if you guys want to go ahead and start doing your homework, I'm planning on doing episodes entirely dedicated to some of my favorite people in film. Alejandro Jodorowsky is my number one, Richard Stanley, Ryan Trecarton. And before the remake of Suspiria comes out, I would really love to put something together about Dario Argento and Giallo films, which is sort of a subgenre of Italian horror movies from the 70s. It's just like a weird niche thing that I've ended up really going down a rabbit hole and enjoying for so many different reasons. So those are some big projects in the future if you guys want to do your homework, if you want something to look forward to. Again, thank you for listening to the first episode of Oafcast. Don't worry about liking. If you subscribe, I think that's like the best way so that you know when new episodes come out. But don't worry about liking it. Don't worry about commenting it. If you have anything to say, any sort of feedback at all, I would love it. Audio suggestions. If you have a suggestion for me to watch something, you want to hear me talk about something, a book. Eventually we're going to talk about Dune, which is now my favorite book of all time, and I can't wait to just do a whole episode dedicated to Dune and the future movie coming out and what I think about that in comparison to Blade Runner. So anything you have to tell me, I'm on Instagram at Oaftobar. If you go to oaftobar.com, you can find me like my Twitter and shit there. I think my Twitter handle is at TickwanBB, which is like just a silly name. We can talk about that sometime. We can talk about Oaftobar too if anybody's interested. But, it's not too hard to find me, not too hard to get in contact with me. I really appreciate you guys listening. And these podcasts are only going to get better. There's going to be some music, some sounds. There's going to be lots of guests in the future. This is just the beginning. I fucking promise you guys that, and I'm really fucking glad that you guys are listening if you made it this far. I just really appreciate it. So thank you guys very much, and go listen to some Rogan. See you later.